Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Left 4 Dead 2. So we kind of got out of order with the developer commentary, so we're going to just go ahead and start with that. We'll do the cemetery, which is I think where we were. We can be any character, we don't care. Let's hop into it. Yeah, I want to hear the commentary. It's not been great, frankly, as far as deep, detailed information, but I do feel like the commentary in the second game is better than the commentary in the first game. Like, ideally, I'd like to see developer commentary become like a master class in video game development.
Don't trolls live under here?
Because that is the more interesting thought. Interesting. I guess I dropped my gun when I picked up the baton, which means now I cannot get a gun. Seems like that's an odd mistake to be allowed to make.
This got to hook up with the bridge.
Up until Left 4 Dead 2, all playtests conducted at Valve required an observer from the team to sit behind each tester and observe them directly. For Left 4 Dead 2, we developed a system where a single observer could view each playtester's screen in parallel with webcams that captured the playtester's reaction. We recorded every playtest so we could go back and reference specific moments at will. This meant that most of the team could continue working during the playtest, which often takes several hours out of every day.
Yeah. To not have a system like that somewhat implemented even 12 years ago is ridiculous, though. Let's just run the accounting numbers here. You have a associate level higher than a playtester who's probably getting paid peanuts sitting behind you. Let's say even that the observer and the playtester are getting paid the exact same amount of money. You're still paying two people's salaries in Redmond, Washington, one assumes, because this does not sound like they had any kind of remote work capability set up before that. You're paying two people's salaries for 8 hours a day, one assumes, minimum. Probably closer to 10 or 12 hours a day. With one person really just sitting behind a person, that's ridiculous. Which almost certainly a system like that reduces the amount of time you want to actually have playtesting be implemented on. It should have been easy even at even 12 years ago to have a system that would record the monitor. A lot of engines now can just send ridiculously large amounts of information back to a server, even past playtesting in actual gameplay. That's due to the advantage of improved internet speeds. So I guess we came this way. That's what I'm thinking. Then we went up here. I guess we were jumping on this. But yeah, nowadays you probably wouldn't even want a camera to get the facial reaction of somebody, like, because that's easily misinterpreted by, like, when really you should get the way people feel through surveys and interviews in playtesting, and you should be getting direct feed from the game anyways, because playtesting will also be for bugs, and so you need kind of a recording of that. Basically all you need is open broadcast software at this point. You could easily use that to record gameplay and send that gameplay over a network shared drive, and you could easily set up open broadcast software to point a camera.
This drop onto the bus shows a good example of what we call a return. If a survivor walks on top of the bus, he has a height advantage against the infected. However, a smoker can pull him down off the bus so that he has to go around and up the stairs to get back with the rest of the team.
And they thought that was ideal. I mean, I'm not going to complain too much on that scenario because it didn't happen a lot, but there definitely were a couple of points in which I ended up having to walk through an area twice, and it felt kind of silly. But I think a lot of that highlights the fact that this game is desperate to make you play more of it than it's really worth. And had they not had that level of desperation, you could have had a much more tight and concise experience. And a scripted experience where a smoker pulls you down and you have to fight through a scripted amount of enemies a second time to get back where you were is very different from just a procedurally generated maybe this will happen experience.
I'm grabbing pills.
Setting fires to zombies was always a high point in Left 4 Dead, and we wanted even more ways to light zombies on fire in Left 4 Dead 2. This dream gave rise to incendiary ammo. Initially, we dispensed incendiary ammo and later explosive ammo from fixed ammo boxes placed through the levels. These boxes could be used many times by a player. But while this was fun for playtesters, we found that they were either hesitant to progress away from the item or hoarded the special ammo until they really needed it. We tried replacing one of our previous experiments, the ammo pack, with a version that deployed a 1 use per player ammo upgrade box. This allowed players to carry the upgrade pack until they sensed they would need a little more firepower in an upcoming arena, and the player carrying it gets the satisfaction of providing a substantial buff to his teammates.
Yeah, the problem though is there's really never a scenario where it is best to use the fire bullets because the zombies are procedurally generated and they just keep coming.
Machete here. Reloading.
You also have a problem in single player that is probably less of an issue. Is that gonna blow up? Yes, it is. This guy's stuck in the geometry. That's not a good statement to the source engine. Yeah, the fact that these guys use their fire bullets immediately makes it a scenario where you, in single player, if you're playing on expert and you really needed the fire bullets to do something cool, you would have to deploy it
Weapons here.
right during a boss fight, a non-existent boss fight, really. That definitely gets back to that thought more than anything, that there is just a lot of room here for some boss fights at the end of each scenario. Something that would kill you. I wouldn't be upset if this game was more of a rogue-like game, and most teams usually would die and not make it through the boss, and that the hour of gameplay going through a campaign up until a boss was the point where you would grind and try and save your bullets.
As with the smoker, the spitter has a gameplay style which necessitates making her more visible to the player at a distance. Since the spitter's strategy is to hit and run, striking at the survivors from far away, we needed distinct visual markers to differentiate her in the dark spaces during the chaos of combat. To this end, we concocted a glowing drool that would illuminate her and create a sharp contrast to the other game colors, while playing off the green death motif associated with the infection. The trail she leaves, which is visually similar to her projectile attack, allows players a brief chance to track her movements when she retreats to hide.
So her AI is designed to retreat at first, and I guess that explains why she ran away first, and then come out of hiding almost instantly to attack, which clearly I think the AI programming there needs to be 3 different modes based on the distance of the survivors. If she's really close, she retreats and hides, or if she's taking a lot damage, she retreats and hides. If she's far away, she should immediately attack, and if she's too far away to attack, she should run there. And they're not going to talk about just the visuals on this character being particularly grotesque, and I will venture to guess it feels a little sexist to me that we have the witch in her underwear in the first game, and then we have a female boomer that is just kind of a copy of the male boomer, which both of those are making fun of really fat people, just making a morbidly obese character. And then you have
Zombies didn't bring down that chopper.
and then you have the spitter, who looks like trailer trash, wearing no bra and big old saggy boobs and a big old hanging gut and a thong showing, and then her neck and ponytails. Whereas the hunter looks just like a kind of generic human male, and how do you get past this? And the smoker kind of looks like a generic male, and the other zombies just look like generic humans. I would argue that they are probably in a better position if they had consistently
After we shipped support for custom
made
add-on
all the
campaigns via the
special
PPK format, we realized that while many people
infected
can install and play
have
these
like a
campaigns,
glowing green
it was
around
difficult
them.
to discover what add-on campaigns other players were playing. We also noticed that few players were joining games of different difficulties, since it wasn't clear how many other games were available for each setting. To solve this, we implemented a browser that shows nearby lobbies. The lobby browser displays the campaign, the difficulty level, and how many lobbies have open slots available. We also display lobbies for campaigns you have not yet installed, offering the chance to download them directly. Once the lobby browser was released, we saw a sharp increase in the number of custom campaigns being played. Custom survival maps are particularly popular, with themes ranging from supermarkets to medieval castles.
Interesting how that it would only fall over if I hit it at this pivot point. Yep, I really don't have anything to complain about as far as a lobby browser in general. That could always be improved. Matchmaking can always be improved. I would say even in 2021, matchmaking is probably closer to its infancy than being a fully polished concept.
Reloading.
The bigger complaint I can always make, though, is when you have an ever-increasing number of online-focused games, and you have a game that's 12 years old, the audience, as far as online players, is going to be limited.
The laser sight weapon upgrade came from an experiment during the development of the first Left 4 Dead, though we didn't end up shipping them at the time. While developing Left 4 Dead 2, when we were talking about interesting items that players could scavenge out of the levels, we remembered the visual impact of those red laser beams. The original intention of the item was to increase the accuracy of the guns, but the more valuable benefit was accidental. You could now see where the other members of your team were aiming. We also liked the choices that confronted players when they had to decide whether or not to swap out their upgraded weapon for one of a different style.
Boy, they point their gun at you a lot. With modern ray tracing, certainly having laser sights would be a nice feature in any future Left 4 Dead type game, so you'd want to see that in Back 4 Blood. Problem here, I would say though, is your laser sight on this gun kind of disappears. Like, even with the laser out, there's a dot and then there's a little bit of a laser, and that's it. And you don't have lasers on handguns, which just seems like an obvious oversight. It would be way more useful for it to be on the handguns, which you're going to use a lot more of. That gets into a bigger issue, certainly, as far as just the imbalance between handguns, which are used a lot in this game, and special guns, which are used very few.
He was unconscious down there for like a week. During that time, unbeknownst to Keith, they paved over him. Keith had to...
Ellis, sweetie, can this wait?
Okay.
Seems like half of Ellis's stories just end. So I wonder if Ellis would keep telling that story if Rochelle was dead at that scenario. Probably not, because it feels like all the voice acting for every character except for Ellis is to just shut Ellis up. Seems like they took a fairly large amount of damage.
Guns!
Just for him. Yeah, we didn't look around here to see just how big this underground area was. It seems to me like it is just kind of a zombie spawning chamber, and they did intentionally set it up so that you could not see the areas around it. Often when you have a game like this that is multiplayer focused, I kind of wish there was a definitive edition remaster to just turn it into a single player experience. It often feels like they are just chasing the dragon as far as multiplayer.
Fire bullets here. Everyone, grab some incendiary ammo.
I guess that lets you refill that. And see, this sequence here would have been about the best place to have a melee weapon. So why is there not a bunch of melee weapons on the ground to pick up? And if that was the idea that they were going to do, wouldn't it have made a lot more sense to have more sequences like this?
Do not shoot any of the cars.
Also, if that was not their intention, then they did just want a booby-trapped area where you're highly likely to shoot cars. Why didn't we see more of those sequences?
After Left 4 Dead 1 shipped, we wanted to experiment with an optional crescendo event. The impound lot is the final version of that experiment. It's difficult for a survivor team to navigate through without setting off a single car alarm, and if they manage it, the experience of carefully sneaking through an obstacle course full of traps is itself quite rewarding.
So this one's not blinking.
Move careful. Watch your fire, and we'll be just fine. The
odds that 4 multiplayer people would not activate that seems incredibly low.
Up that ladder.
And I guess if they're coming at it from the perspective of that was an optional crescendo event, then obviously that concept fell apart and they didn't like it, because we don't really see a lot of that anywhere else. Feels like walking through that sequence should have given me an achievement.
We on the bridge. We're almost out of this place.
Again, you have to just be looking in the right direction or you're going to completely miss it. I don't think I've taken a single piece of damage. Ellis is way over there. That'd be interesting to see how far you can actually get away from somebody before they just respawn.
Nightstick here.
Since managing health with a first aid kit is such a large part of the player's decision process, finding a new item for the backpack slot proved to be difficult. We wanted the new item to be as valuable as a health kit in certain situations and have a big benefit for the team, as opposed to being merely another offensive weapon. It needed to have a user interface similar to the health kit, requiring a target and an action that takes some time to perform.
First aid kit here.
We also liked the idea of an item that would act like a get-out-of-jail-free card, an insurance policy in case of a tank or witch attack. Our exaggerated version of a hospital defibrillator immediately conveyed the purpose of the item. Plus, it gives the survivors a chance to yell, "Clear!"
But you can't use it in single player at all, so it's kind of useless.
First aid kit here.
It feels like you should be able to use the defibrillator more as a weapon, where you would just melee zombies and electrocute them, and it really highlights once again how I think this game would be much better if it had electrical effects.
Gonna head down and find another way up onto the bridge.
He did respawn. There's no way he made it there. This developer commentary as gameplay is super easy because they just don't throw any special effect at you, which this definitely shows that if this was just a standard zombie game without any of this special infected, it would be incredibly boring.
Something that was always sad for us to watch in Left 4 Dead was that players would always choose an optimized path through a level once they played the map a couple times. That meant the hard work we put into other areas of the map would never be seen.
I didn't even
So one
see
thing
this
we wanted
part.
to add in Left 4 Dead 2 was the ability for the AI director to change the path of the survivors through a level, so they have to take a different path each time. The cemetery contains one example of this new approach. There are 4 different paths that the AI director can create for the survivors. It does this by spawning in and out particular crypts and gates.
Does it?
Reloading.
I guess it does, because this was not here before. And boy, does that feel obvious. But that's just not, like,
Anyone need some pills?
it's just not something I managed to see in my first playthrough. I thought this whole area was just wide open in playing it. And I guess this 4 different paths is still not really that varied.
Reloading.
Reloading.
But we kind of know that the garden area earlier probably wasn't randomized. And I cannot really believe that there were too many scenarios in which the path was randomized.
Grenade launcher.
Right? Suppose you can still mostly enter a lot of these areas.
Reloading.
My experience with these this grave was just hearing
Anyone
the
need some pills?
witch cry and being afraid that the witch might kill me, and expecting that to be a kind of scripted experience, only to be able to fairly easily just walk around the witch and not even see her. Which is not great at all. It isn't a good experience to expect a kind of boss fight and be disappointed when there's really no action. I have to wander around a little bit to get back to the area with the developer commentary. See, that once again feels like a fairly obvious wall. Yep. These are very, very obvious. I don't feel like these were in the game in single player. This guy's just dying over here. Ellis is getting consistently stuck.
Reloading.
I have no idea why Ellis's AI is all of a sudden not working. We haven't really seen any problem with that before. I will applaud this game for having a lot of breakable objects.
When we began development on Left 4 Dead 2, we decided early on to cast a totally new band of survivors in the lead roles. This involved extensive
Mistake, in
concept
my
sketches,
opinion.
then a period of evaluating actors with the help of several talent agencies.
Paying
Once
artists.
the actors were cast, we brought them in for a full costume photo shoot and conducted 3D scanning of their facial features.
Yeah, they wanted
This
to play with
reference
the
was then
3D
used by our
scanners.
artists to create high-detail digital sculpts, which formed the basis of our in-game characters. The goal from the beginning was to provide the player with a lineup of believable survivors, real people juxtaposed against extraordinary situations.
Is that not the case
Well,
with
thank
the
God for small favors.
original characters? I felt like the original characters were believable enough.
You know why they bury him above ground? They bury him like that because they're under sea level.
Yes, Ellis, it is. Okay, it is.
That line of dialogue didn't even make sense. Yeah, you just can't change things that much in a sequel. You can do a little bit, but at the
First aid here.
end of the day, Ellis is like, what can we even do? It seems like his targeting or something has got him pointed in the wrong direction.
Real good. I know you shot me.
Let me see if I could maybe shoot him to convince him to get back on track. It's like maybe I just bumped him or something. And see, now I can't bump him even. But yeah, if Portal 2 had come out and you were playing as a different character from Chell, that wouldn't have been acceptable. If Half-Life 2 had come out, oh, I think actually some of Half-Life 2 did come out and you were playing as,
First aid kit here.
playing as a different character than Gordon. So I guess that's probably a bad example, but if anything, that's probably an improvement since the main character in Half-Life is kind of a non-talking character anyways. But yeah, There was a Halo game where you really were only spending half the game playing as Master Chief. That didn't really work. I'm sure there's probably half a dozen examples of games that would have come out either before this game or after this game came out to show that changing the main character in a sequel does not make sense.
Shit!
Well, it's official. They're trying to kill us now.
There is just maybe Ellis is now fixed at this point. No way that's ever gonna work. You might as well have made a whole new game. You can make a bit of a compromise, certainly, and have 4 new characters that randomly come in as playable characters and include the original characters. Particularly for the instance of Left 4 Dead. It's funny, they're all dropping their laser-sighted guns. But, like, even for bland characters like the characters in Left 4 Dead 1, you should have just worked with what you already have created and not tried to create something new and replace something new. Obviously, they just wanted to have celebrity-looking faces that they could face scan, and face scan technology was something they wanted to play with. And that's kind of the problem with Valve in general, is that the only games recently that Valve has made and released, it was on VR, because they've been playing around and trying to get VR as a technology to work. They are technophiles more than they are gamers, and they're just trying to do something revolutionary and new and interesting to instead of just
God damn it, quit fussing and let me heal you.
doing what might be a fairly generic experience.
Hold on, man. I'll fix you.
And may not really break any new grounds, but would at least maintain. Oops. This just had a pop up. Let me pause the game and close that. There we go.
Once for a whole year. It wasn't a dare or nothing. He just got kicked out of his house. He said he never saw a single ghost except this one time when a ghost stabbed him from behind.
You ain't got time for this, Ellie.
So yeah, there's just not
Reloading.
that Valve seems to make it feel like there's shame in doing something that's kind of generic and bespoke, and that is what has hampered the development of a Half-Life 3, certainly, because at any point they could have put out a game called it Half-Life 3. It could have been alright, it could have been a solid A minus, but they just can't bear that in their souls, apparently. As creators, they have to make something that is 110% or nothing at all, and they're letting perfect be the enemy of good.
The writers originally devised a biography for a convict character. There was an idea that here in the lawless world of the infected, this escaped convict, sick of wearing prison clothes, had taken the effort to loot a very expensive white suit from an abandoned clothing store. He might as well survive the apocalypse in style. This concept gradually evolved into the Riverboat Gambler.
Oh. So Nick is a riverboat gambler. Sure feels like they should have given him more dialogue, so I knew that after playing every single campaign. I had heard that he was a gambler, and not really heard anything about being a riverboat gambler. I don't know why you would specifically depict somebody as a riverboat gambler compared to just a gambler anyways. He only gambles on riverboats? It would be the implication. And of course you have to ask the question about, was the Telltale game Walking Dead Season 1 out by the time Left 4 Dead 2 was out? Because if it was, then that the idea of a convict being a main character would have overlapped. And I suspect maybe it wasn't out at that time, but that doesn't mean they both weren't in similar development times.
This balcony was designed as a fish in a barrel moment, where the survivors can come out to the street and pick off a bunch of the wandering infected without being in much danger. We felt it was a good introduction to our interpretation of Bourbon Street, giving a nice atmospheric vista without too much immediate threat.
So this is supposed to be New Orleans? That I wish they had told me. There's a considerable lack of bars if this is supposed to be Bourbon Street, and a considerable lack of what would be kind of iconic music playing if this was supposed to be Bourbon Street. There's a problem though with the idea of introducing a fish in a barrel scenario, in that these zombies constantly respawn and you're just getting minute, insignificant score improvements for every zombie you kill. So there's, yeah, I've said it probably a dozen times now, there's just no reason to actually kill zombies. Like, you might as well just run from them, which is exactly what I have seen people playing this game and similar games to it. It's exactly how I've seen people play. It's just, let's run from the beginning to the end as quickly as possible, because we've all done this 100 times over, and we're just grinding out for achievements, or we're just killing time.
Level designers in Left 4 Dead 1 placed individual items, such as pipe bombs,
Here's a
Molotovs,
damaged
and
car.
pills,
I missed that.
all over the levels. The AI director had the ability to pick which instance of each item to spawn. This meant that pills would never spawn in the same place as a pipe bomb or Molotov. In Left 4 Dead 2, we decided that we wanted more variety in item spawning, so we now simply place an entity called a weapon item spawn. The AI director not only chooses whether or not an item will spawn in a given location, it also chooses what type of item will appear.
And again, they still are very much pushing the idea of AI director being some groundbreaking technology.
Shoot that zombie in the back.
But the AI director from Left 4 Dead didn't even really get integrated into the source engine. It was never used in any other games, at least nothing was ever called the AI director. It is still just procedural generation, which plenty of games have. It really feels like they're trying to sell you on a technology that is not real by giving it a different name.
Fire in the hole!
I didn't know there was that many zombies there. I was just throwing a bomb because I was bored.
We deliberately sought to design iconic French Quarter locales that would be fun to fight in. This jazz club gave us a nice large interior space that offered a break from exterior streets and alleys.
But it's too dark.
Fire bullets here!
It's just too dark. You don't even get to see it. And the coolest part about this was when the boomer just accidentally spawned here and it blew up all the tables. There's no French Quarter type music like jazz music playing. It's incredibly dark. Nothing here makes this feel. And see, that may have been procedurally generated that the boomer did spawn, but now that we're in developer commentary, it won't spawn. There should be some reward in which these guys get killed if you melee them from behind or when they're not attacking you.
Tails here!
One of the challenges with melee weapons is getting them to feel right and look decent. In
And
order
I
to
don't
get the
think they
fire axe to
achieved
look
that.
right when playing the game, it had to cross the screen within 3 or 4 frames. To enhance visibility, we swapped between the normal axe and a smeared version, along with a particle effect to cheat a motion blur. The smeared axe hits at the correct time, but allows your eyes to follow the action.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like you're swinging an axe very fast for as heavy of an object. But it doesn't feel particularly different from what you would experience just shooting a swinging a gun. And I am like so bored at the moment. Like I have to say, this is incredibly boring gameplay without the special infected spawning. Like I am just trying to start fires, trying to make explosions, trying to do anything at all that would create a crescendo event or something, and that just can't happen. So it's just these wandering stragglers, which obviously at this point you can tell the wandering stragglers are pretty much scripted zombies.
Because sound is such a crucial gameplay element in Left 4 Dead, the designers needed temporary sounds to test out ideas for the new boss infected. Sometimes we were able to pull temp sounds from unused performances in our library, but in Left 4 Dead 2, the sound designers did their own temp performances. The goal with these is to be just functional enough to test the new character's viability. As such, some of the temp voices for the characters were quite funny. While inappropriate for the actual game, some of the sounds were highly popular within the team, and it was common to hear animators up and down the halls mimicking the early Charger test calls.
Okay.
Man, I don't know which way.
That's a comedic bit of developer commentary, I suppose, but without a special mod to bring back that sound file for the game as like a joke mod, that's not really actionable information. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? To know that at one point the developers of this game were having some fun while developing it. I mean, like, good to know. I don't want to hear that the developers were 100% miserable all the time making the game. Although, in all fairness, I feel like a lot of game developers probably should be a little bit more miserable while making their games, so that the games actually come out better. But yeah, that commentary node felt like it was just there because they are running out of things to say.
Reloading.
And if this were the equivalent of a DVD commentary, you would probably have 3 or 4 people who worked on the game talking non-stop consistently while the gameplay or video footage of the gameplay was happening. And that's what you would typically see these days, is instead of there being a developer commentary in a game, is you would just have the creators of the game play the game, stream it to YouTube or Twitch, and talk over it. Even creators of very old games are going back and playing their old games, or talking over footage of people playing their games.
Left 4 Dead 2's level designers started out by experimenting with variants on the proven designs of Left 4 Dead 1. For example, we tried out several situations where there was a benefit to splitting up the group. We soon found that Left 4 Dead 1 had done such a good job of training people to stick together, it was incredibly difficult to get them to separate. We abandoned that experiment, but retained some of the elements to apply during crescendo events. For example, in the mall gun shop sequence, it can sometimes be advantageous to send 1 or 2 survivors to retrieve the cola, while the remaining survivors stay on high ground to provide cover.
This is the only traditional crescendo event in the Parish campaign. In Left 4 Dead 1, every crescendo event was essentially a button press where players held out in one spot until the infected stopped coming. While we added the onslaught and optional crescendo variations, we felt that the old school Left 4 Dead style event still had some life in it.
So they're considering it a traditional event if you have to press a button, which we see that in about 3, maybe 4 campaigns. And yeah, I saw this and I thought it was a Mardi Gras thing, but I figured it was just a Mardi Gras thing in some city that was sort of like New Orleans. And yeah, I guess I'm not familiar enough with Bourbon Street to know what it should look like. I think a lot of people in the United States would not be really familiar enough to recognize it. You're definitely asking a lot without just directly saying this is New Orleans, this is Mardi Gras.
Looking at reference from New Orleans, we saw a lot of images of Mardi Gras. We decided we couldn't have a campaign set in that region without a parade float. We designed our float to look a bit sinister, whereas most jester heads are typically bright and goofy. We wanted ours to be a bit darker and more scary, so we made the model appear more angular. We also chose colors that were less cheerful and more in keeping with the fall festival.
Fall festival? Do they mean Halloween? What do they even mean when they say fall festival in that instance? See, and this makes no sense. As if they have this jazz music, why did they not have the jazz music playing earlier? And honestly, if they wanted to get really fancy, what I would suggest is they should have had this car rolling by itself at the very beginning of the game and kind of intertwining a path where you just see it and hear it, and you see a whole bunch of zombies walking towards it, and then it would just crash into a wall at this point, and that would be your path to the path across. Like a zombie at the very beginning of the level would actually accidentally step on the switch and activate it, start the music. It would always be on the other side of a fence walking, causing a horde of zombies to follow it, but then half the zombies would turn and attack you, and it would trigger several crescendo events. This moving platform could have been your nemesis throughout the entire level to then turn into your savior. And that would have been interesting twists. Interesting twists that, of course, didn't happen. I believe there was some laser sights here when I first played it. Whatever. Let's see.
Adrenaline shot here.
And since there's nothing really going on with the game, there's really not a lot here. I still am upset that the water heaters don't explode. Even though shooting a water heater probably wouldn't make it explode.
Valve has a history of supporting community developers and helping to promote their creations. And with the Left 4 Dead games, we've taken the opportunity to make the great content our community produces even more accessible with our new add-on system. Content creators can package new campaigns into a single add-on file, which end users can easily install. Users can now view titles, descriptions, authors, and other information for all of their installed add-ons via an in-game interface. Add-ons work seamlessly with the matchmaking system so that users can quickly get into games featuring community campaigns they've already installed and can easily download new ones to try. The response to Left 4 Dead add-ons has been very positive, and we were happy to see huge, all-new campaigns being played within weeks of the system going live.
And I don't know what to really say there, because that's not like that's new technology. The idea of Doom WADs and modified Doom levels existed decades before that. Being able to integrate that with your matchmaking system probably took more work than it would seem like it would. So I guess I can applaud that. Of course, Steam now has the Steam Workshop integration, which pretty much any game, regardless of whether it's using the source engine or not, can integrate mods. And there's some of that happens, but not a lot. Frankly, I'd say 8% of players probably ever go look for a mod for a game, and it has to be a game they really, really love. And I would argue Left 4 Dead 2, Left 4 Dead 1, while a decent game, both of them, not going to be on your top 10 list of games you want to play. And so why would you want to go and find out more, play mods on them, and find more gameplay for something that's frankly not that varied as far as weapon and enemy layout and level design? In comparison, one of my favorite games is the Portal series, Portal 1 and Portal 2. And even in that case, Portal 2 really only has maybe 3 mods that are worth talking about at all. And of course you have the Skyrim community who love Skyrim, that play a lot of mods. The vast majority, I think, over 50% of all the mods though for Skyrim are really either joke mods or adult mods, and are things that people really only install because they just love the RPG experience of Skyrim. Arguably also, I would say another 15% of mods are just interface and visual improvements to Skyrim, fixing problems with the game. Whereas I doubt you could have made a mod that would have introduced a new special infected or reskinned the characters that much, or done anything like that.
Given the realistic nature of Left 4 Dead, players expect the zombies and survivors to move in natural ways. However, animating that kind of motion by hand is very difficult and time-consuming, and anyone can tell when it's not quite right. Since we don't want every zombie to move the same way, a large number of motions are required to provide enough variety. All of these constraints drove us to use motion capture. The process of motion capture really begins with the character designs. Once we've decided how we want the survivors and zombies to look and behave, we audition actors just as we would any other performance piece. For instance, a 265-pound high school coach moves very differently from a 115-pound TV producer. Using one actor for both roles would be a mistake. So we look for people who fit the body type and who can bring out the character's personality and their motion. On the other hand, in the case of the zombies, we consider them more like feral animals. So we'll use only one actor for all of them, regardless of gender. We then provide the studio with a digital character, a list of the moves we would like to do, and the props we'll need. Once actors are chosen, we head to the studio and spend a day with them recording the motions we need for the game. It's a very physically demanding day, and in order not to exhaust the actor early in the session, we oscillate the captures between high and low intensity actions. Just try crouch walking 40 feet as our survivors do, and you'll feel the burn. But that's just one of hundreds of motions we record for each character. During the session, we can watch the actor's motion applied in real time to our character model and work with them to get the look we want. In some cases, we do multiple takes to let the actor provide us with different perspectives or to add some variety. We also record the actor on video during the motion capture to use for extra reference. With the motions recorded, the studio processes the data, and then it is up to us to extract the motions we want to keep. For some motions, we need to create loops. For example, to create a run cycle, we may only use half a second from the 3 seconds of running we recorded at the session. We augment these recorded motions with adjustments or additions by hand, and then compile them into the character models you see in-game. Realistic human motion is very subtle and noisy, and we can all tell subconsciously when it isn't quite right, even if we can't articulate why. Without motion capture, the characters of Left 4 Dead wouldn't be nearly as convincing or as interesting as they are.
So apparently Rochelle is a TV producer, and during that developer commentary, they talk about crouch walking, and they should have been able to show a character crouch walking, but they didn't spawn any characters. Now, I could make an argument that a small, and I would suspect very small, percentage of animators were not hired or given less work because they did motion capture. But in all honesty, I bet the animators making 3D models and tweaking 3D motions from motion capture still had plenty of work to do. It's not believable that you could create a scenario where you just 100% motion captured a character and could just directly plug that into your software without having a 3D animator polish it and make it look a little bit better, tweak it. Same is true for face scanning in a similar way. Like, even if you are scanning the facial motions of people, you still have to do a lot of tweaking to that. And so it definitely feels like this was the beginning of what would have changed the nature of animators' jobs. There definitely were people that were probably just completely from scratch making facial motions and movement animations, and that has for a lot of games been replaced and removed with just tweaking and adjusting live action motion capture and facial capture. That being said, you still have a situation where a lot of games get more attention even now when they don't have hyper-realistic animation. Cuphead is kind of a great example of that, where somebody has hand-drawn the animations and the characters. There's considerably less of an interest there for things like this. Like AAA games tend to do motion capture and facial capture, and when you have something like Hellblade's Soonest Sacrifice, that's kind of a good example of where that works well. But then a lot of games don't have the budget for that, don't want to hire actors. It led, certainly, over the course of 12 years to a situation where a lot of actors who would be in TV shows and movies all of a sudden started acting in video games more than they would have before. But it also ran into a scenario where a lot of people were being told that they were going in for voice acting jobs, and it has become almost industry standard. As another zombie stuck through a wall glitch. It's been somewhat industry standard to lie to people and say you're coming in to do a voice acting gig, and in actuality they're going to have you do facial capture and motion capture while also speaking lines, and they weren't paying hazard pay, and these were kind of non-union jobs, and there's been a lot of push to unionize voice acting in video games and better disclosure. It has been industry standard for a long time to get hired to do voice acting in a game, not even know what game it is going to be, even when you leave at the end of the day, and just finding out a year or 2 years later that your voice acting is in some major production of a game that you thought was a small indie production, or vice versa.
After we shipped Left 4 Dead, we heard a lot of positive responses about the infected that were unique to their locales. There were patients in the hospital, cops in the streets, and TSA agents in the airport.
I didn't even
We
see
wanted to add
TSA
further
agents.
variety to Left 4 Dead 2's campaigns, so we decided to include an uncommon common infected for each campaign. The first to be added was the Ceta guy. Once we got him in the game, we realized that his uniqueness should not merely be visual, but should extend to gameplay as well. In the case of the Ceta guy, his hazmat suit suggested that he should be impervious to fire. We extended this notion when we added the Mudman, the Clown, the Construction Worker, and the Riot Cop.
So what does the Mudman do other than throw mud on you? What does the Construction Worker do?
Molotov!
Reloading!
Reloading!
Why is the fire spreading so much?
Hey, look out!
Reloading!
It's weird, I felt like the fire spread a little bit more.
Reload!
I guess there were breakable windows in this whole section. I just kind of didn't realize it. It definitely is interesting to say even 12 years ago they were talking about how physically strenuous the crouch walking motion capture was, and even 12 years later that still really has not yet been completely resolved. It's just that kind of work should be considered hazard pay as much as any kind of voice acting job would ever be hazard pay. I guess hazard pay is probably the wrong word, and they should call it something closer to strenuous pay.
In Left 4 Dead, our designers could place alarmed cars in levels. When shot, these cars would flash and make noise, attracting the infected horde. Unfortunately, the alarmed cars would be located in the same position on every playthrough, taking away from the desired unpredictability. In Left 4 Dead 2, designers can now place groups of alarmed cars and let the AI director mix and match which cars have active alarms, if any. For example, in the section of the game that you've just played, there are 3 such cars whose alarm state the director can control dynamically, making this area less predictable from game to game.
Oh, shit!
What? I want to see if I can save anybody. That would mean the zombies would have to get close to somebody.
Reloading.
Maybe that one zombie, had I shot, would have saved Ellis. Maybe. Yeah. Even on easy, with AI characters,
Get your asses in here
they
right
just
now!
don't pose a threat. The average zombie does not pose a threat at all. Now, I assume exiting here still saves your statistics. It'd be really crazy if it didn't. Right, we've been playing for an hour, so what I feel like we'll probably want to do is, yeah, we have the bridge. We went through the cemetery and the quarter, which was 2 of them. So, yeah, I think I need a bit of a break, and then I'll play survival in the next episode. and scavenge. And if we have extra time, I guess we'll try versus. Yeah, we should play versus. But then if we have some real extra time, we'll play like realism versus or versus survival. Which I don't even know what realism versus changes and versus survival, I guess, makes a little bit of sense. But yeah, I still feel like this game kind of ran out of steam for me fairly quickly. I would heavily not suggest playing Left 4 Dead 1 at all at this point. It would have made a lot more sense just to start with Left 4 Dead 2, play all the campaigns with the new systems, and including the Left 4 Dead 1 levels, and then just been done with it. Which just does make an interesting scenario in which a game completely like overwrites and undoes in any value that the original game might have, unless you're a purist and just like the original gameplay mechanics better. But I can't imagine there really are that many people like that. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to further follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.